5 things for you to think about before you start a hardware startup. I'm Doug Malley, CEO of Omega VR, and it's been 4 years since I've been working on Omega VR, and in that time, we've met with 29 different investors, and we've received some grant funding. I'm making this video for anyone who's thinking about starting that process and wants to just have some things to think about in the meantime. The 5 things I'd recommend you think about is identity. Are you the right type of person to be working on this? To think about why you're working on this, who's working on this with you, and how are you going to fund everything? Those are the 5 things you should think about before starting a startup. Let's get right into it. So, identity. With identity, it matters that you are someone who's committed, right? You're able to work on this for 5 to 10 years without receiving any success or validation from the world. That means working in silence, deriving validation and dopamine from the small wins, the process itself, versus being able to make an app in a weekend, post about it, go get funding for it the next month, right? With a hardware startup, it takes the physical manipulation of atoms in the real world to make that happen. And it's a longer process, and the turnaround times and the iteration loops are longer. So it is more demanding on you, the founder. And so just think about that before you start, right? It doesn't matter if you're shy, you're outgoing, those things don't matter. The only thing that matters is your ability to commit to this, to continue to work on this when things get hard, when people are telling you why it's stupid or why it's not likely to work or whatever it may be, right? It is the only thing that matters is if you're able to continue to execute on it, learn the things you need to learn, work on the things you need to work on, make the proper sacrifices to continually prioritize and push the startup forward and forward, right? As long as you're willing to do that, I would think you are someone who is fitted for being a hardware founder, right? The second thing is why. So why are you doing this? Are you doing it for the money, the fame, the riches, the attention, or are you doing this for another reason, right? The mission of why you're doing this is very important. For me, it came down to helping a friend I made in college who was suffering from muscular dystrophy, and I wanted to help him just have access to technology. And I've always wanted to do a business as well. Not always, but since I've grown up, I've always wanted to do that. So it just was a culmination of those two things, and I felt that specific calling, and I'm committed to spending 10 years to this process to see where it goes, to see if I can receive sufficient validation to continue working on it, right? And so just thinking about the why is a very important thing. If you want something short term, I wouldn't recommend a hardware startup. It takes longer than another startup, such as a software startup, right? A software startup can see the MVP, the results. Their software startups are expected to have recurring revenue pretty early on to even get meetings with investors, right? While a hardware startup, they still want recurring revenue, but it's also understood that it's harder to do that. And so you're expected to spend more and invest more into your startup than, say, someone who's making a mobile game, right? So you've got identity, you've got your why, and then your who. So who are you working on this with? Do you have co-founders? Are there anyone who's in your class who's technically adept to assist you in certain aspects of this project? So if you know someone who can commit to the startup equally, and as long as you plan to do it and has the same work ethic, they should be your co-founder. But if not, you can identify a different structure of working together so you can still get the assistance you need while they aren't burdened with the commitment of a 10-year project where you're giving it your all and they may be giving it 60% due to life circumstances. So just think about who you want to do this with. If you want investors prioritize investing into startups with a co-founder or two, right? Usually one who's technical and then the other one could be non-technical, but investors want to see a team that they have faith in being able to build whatever they're saying they're going to build. So if you want to build a nuclear reactor and your major is communications, that's going to be a hard sell, right? Unless you're asking for money to then buy a team, but then why are you in that process, right? So you want to position yourself as being someone capable of achieving the goals of the startup, right? And so within that, there's a lot of learning you have to do. And it's effectively who you want to become or who you are or are becoming, right? That's the self. So the next thing you need to think about is fundraising, right? Are you gonna bootstrap this? Are you gonna go get funding from an investor, or are you gonna try and get a grant? These are things you should think about, right? For me, I'm personally bootstrapping this, and along the way, we've received grant money from an accelerator through my university, and they took no equity as a result of that, which is beneficial to us, right? They've gotten us in connection with investors, and that is the optimal situation, right? Because you get money, you get connections, get resources, and the only thing you're giving up is the time it takes to be part of that process, and it's all beneficial to you at the end of the day. For fundraising, I think if you want VC or angel, you're going to have to reconstruct your startup to be geared for that, right? A bootstrap business looks like something that's going to take a long time, that's going to build the infrastructure necessary to go the distance, right? But with a investor focused startup, you should be trying to spend as little amount of your money as necessary to prove out the point of the startup so you can then get money from others and use their money to build the structure necessary to do that, right? And with that, it is difficult to get venture capital dollars, especially if you're in the Midwest, not in one of these coastal states. So you might have to consider moving elsewhere, finding a co-founder well connected. Finding investment is a full-time job, right? You'll have to go on many meetings with different investors, and you'll hear the same things of, hey, talk to us when you have recurring revenue. We love what you're doing. We love the mission. We love how much you've done, but we need to reduce our risk. And they'll tell you the same things. And eventually you'll find someone who's willing to take that extra risk and make the investment on you. But for that, you're going to have to prioritize a lot of your time, especially if you're a solo founder. That's going to be most of your time on just trying to get investment versus actually building your product. So you need to come to terms with what kind of individual you're going to be, what you're going to focus on, what things you want to learn, what things matter to you. If you want expediency, I do think that going for an investment is probably your best bet if you don't have the 5 to 10 years and you're willing to give up a majority of your startup, then I would recommend doing that. But if you do have the time and the circumstances in your life, I do recommend trying to do the bootstrap method because you learn the most, retain the most control of your business, and it gives you the opportunity to not fail. Because once you take investment, things get sped up, so mistakes get emphasized. There are other people pulling the levers within your business, which makes it easier for you to lose control, right? And so let's just go over it. Identity is first thing to think about. Are you the right type of person, or are you able to become the right type of person to work on a hardware startup? Two, what kind of, I guess, why are you trying to do this, right? Why are you working on this versus going and getting a paycheck elsewhere, right? 9 to 5, a stable paycheck. When you work on a hardware startup or any startup, though, and you're full time on this, paychecks are not guaranteed. And so you need to structure and design your life to be able to work on this full time or at least most of the time. And that looks like you have to get creative, right? You have to be intentional with a lot of things. If you're not fully committed, it is hard enough to do it when you're fully committed, to where if you're not fully committed, it is very difficult for you to not be successful in this. So just make sure that if you're going to do this, make sure you're all in, right? So who are you working on this with? That's the other important aspect. Just make sure you've got someone. If not, make sure you at least have advisors, other friends and engineers that you can reach out to when you're stuck and they can help you out. And then funding, right? Funding is the other aspect to think about. So one last time, identity, why, who, and then funding. Those are the four. Did I miss one? Identity, why, funding, and then lifestyle. That's the one I was forgetting. Lifestyle. With lifestyle, that's the biggest one, right? You need to design your life to be compatible with a startup, especially a hardware startup. You need equipment to actually build your product. So you need space, right? For me, I live with my parents, and when I was working full time, I was paying rent, and now I am fortunate enough to not have to pay rent. And I acquired most of the equipment I needed, and then I was able to just set up everything I needed, assuming I never got another dollar to make a very compelling product to either sell or reach out to investors. That was my goal and ambition when I was working to get to the place where I could take the next step. I wanted to go full time because once you go full time, you are able to very focus in and your mindset shifts, right? You don't have a backup plan. You're not consumed with your day job and then you work at night for the 1 hour and then you go back to work the next day, but you've been really thinking about work and it's just your mindset's different when you're working full time. And so when you're committed and you make the leap, investors, you treat yourself differently and so your lifestyle takes a lot of thinking proactively. So when you're even in college, the colleges you go to, and how much debt you take on, and what classes you take, and the people you meet, and all of these things can be shaped. So when you do start your startup, you're beneficial. The relationship you have with your parents, if you can live at home with your parents and not pay rent and fully dive in and commit to this, you can get so much further than someone who has to pay rent, pay $1,000, $2,000 a month, and then paid off their school student loan debt, and then they're left with maybe 200, $300 to spend a month on their startup. That's no way to progress a hardware startup. So you have to be almost irresponsibly committed to make any sufficient process and progress, right? Because without that, it's going to take you way too long, and other things in your life are going to start to cannibalize your time, attention, and your resources. So you just really need to be intentional and design a life that is compatible with a hardware startup. So just think about that before you start a hardware startup because it's not easy. You can't do this passively. It's not like picking up pickleball, right? Where you go 5 hours a week. No, this is most of your life. Most of the things you think about will be in relation to this. It is not a pair of jeans you put on, it is a choice that it is like a sheet that you use to determine the things you do and do not do in your life, right? To go on vacation, to go to weddings, to spend money on things you wanna do versus things you need to do, right? Your hobby, your passion, your work, it's all the same thing, right? It is a hardware startup, and that's the level it needs to be at for you to have a chance of succeeding in creating something new. So those are the 5 things. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you guys learned something or it was thought provoking. I'll go much more into depth on all the different aspects in future videos. My name is Dog Maui. I'm the CEO of Omega VR, and stay tuned.